Welcome to Soulish Fam. I'm Glenna Vilmanarang, your host for today. Thank you for tuning in to Real Talk with me, airing every Monday and Thursday. On this podcast, I dive into healing from trauma and share practical tools to help you discover and become who you are in God. Plus, you'll also find a variety of my other interests: fashion, travel, food, and more. If you're ready to embark on your healing journey, I invite you to check out my online course on Udemy, Mending the Mind and Heart, Healing After Trauma. Thanks for being here. Hello everyone, this is the last episode of the month of December. I cannot believe it. 2025 is gone, and hello 2026. Hopefully 2026 is a lot better than last year, or this year perhaps. Today's episode is about developing AI. No, I am not speaking about artificial intelligence. It is the kind of AI. Maybe I'm going to get this, trademark, so people are not going to copy this, but besides the point. I'm talking about awaken internally. AI. Awaken internally. Perhaps the greatest gift that you need to invest in 2026, instead of the old nonsense of New Year's resolution, losing weight, eating healthy, the whole enchilada. We've seen it before. Everybody fails most of the time. What if all the problem that you've had, like eating disorder, cannot keep up with your routine, or depression, or lethargic in life, apathetic in life, whatever kind of problem that you may be facing, because your internal ignition, whatever you want to call it, internal psyche, is actually messed up. Your nervous system has been compromised. You are not forcing yourself to be healed, or you're not even helping yourself for that matter. You are stuck in the loop. You are actually in this survival mode still. This is why for many people, as I went a video or podcast saying about in the wilderness, it is the analogy of life that when you're in the wilderness, you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again, which is insanity. You have the same pattern. You cannot break loose from it. You do the same thing. You say the same thing as if you are just being programmed like a puppet and you don't have a choice for the matter. So sometimes we think that the problem is out there and the solution is also out there, and we do not really look within ourselves. As much as you may want to call it the kingdom of God is within you, the issue does not lie in other people. I know people contributed to your problem. My problem most of the time were contributed by people, but the question is, what do you do after that? Do you perpetually play the victim? Do you perpetually blame other people? Do you perpetually are just going to stay stagnant and complacent and apathetic in life just because of the bad things that happen to you in your life? Listen to what this verse says. I forgot which verse this is. It says, "In the day of prosperity, be joyful. But in the day of adversity, consider. God has appointed the one as well as the other, so that man can find out nothing that will come after him." Meditate on that verse. When you are prosperous, learn to be joyful. When you are only happy because everything is going well, it's a lot easier to be happy and counting your blessings. However, in the day of adversity, consider it. When you have been awakened internally, even if your life is not perfect and everything is crumbling down underneath your feet, you can still have joy. Joy is not the absence of problem. You can have joy in the midst of trial. You cannot allow one circumstance to ruin your day. It takes a lot of practice, self-awareness, and determination to get out of bed. I used to be one of those people. I used to spend my time when I was so depressed and sad, when I had a big argument with people, I would be underneath the blanket, feel sorry for myself, cry me a river, and the whole day would be ruined. And I have nothing done. I haven't even brushed my teeth or combed my hair or taken a shower. and I will just ruminate of what the person said, of how he made me feel. How dare you speak to me this way? And then you just realize that it's about the afternoon and you're still having a self-pity party, minus the champagne, because at that point, it's only your tears in your bed. And that is exactly why it's important that when you are awakened internally, you are no longer going to function in that victimhood mindset. This is why I always like to say what Jesus profoundly said to the man laying for 38 years, pick up your mat and start walking. There's a time in our life that we can only talk too much or say so much about our problem, go to the therapist perhaps. It only lasts for a while until that has no longer an effect on you. Because sometimes talking so much about your problem with the same old saga, the same old drama, because we want sympathy from people, there's an expiration date for that. Because after the whole talking, you must start walking. You must start creating life. You must start celebrating your life. And this is why having an awaken internally is knowing that you are not going to wait around for people to knock at your door and making you get up and brush your teeth, because as I said, no one will do that for you. No one can make you exercise. No one can force you to get up, because I remember the time when I was so tired of trying to live. I was just done. I said to God, I am done living. I am sick and tired of this life. What's the point of trying anyway? But that verse, when I read that story from a man at the pool of Bathsheba, when Jesus said, do you want to be well? It was that question that truly changed of how I see myself. Do you want to be made well? And I asked myself the same question. Do I want to be made well? So how does a well person behave? How does a person that is awakened internally conduct herself and live her life? If you want to be made well, you must stop having a self-pity party. You must stop playing the victim. Woe is me. I am hopeless. I am helpless. I have no choice in that matter. I don't have a brain of my own. I cannot make a decision. If you want to be made well, because you are awakened internally, you must learn to celebrate life. Learn to celebrate this one precious moment, which is the gift from above, because the only guarantee is today. We are never promised of tomorrow. Today is sufficient enough, because you never know what tomorrow brings. You don't know if we're still going to be here tomorrow. That's why Jesus said, today's problem is sufficient enough. You cannot worry about the future. You cannot worry about the past, because it's already gone and done. Look at the bird in the sky. Look at the lilies in the field. They do not toil nor spin. They don't really worry so much about what's happening in the world, even though the world is chaotic. The world is, as we know it, erratic. People are doing crazy things today, as we see in the news. However, we cannot possibly be distracted by the tactic of the devil, because the world has always been this way. We do not live in a perfect world. If you see the history throughout generation, we live through famines, wars, earthquakes, pestilences, and that's just what the world is. That's the world does. However, you do have a control. It is you navigating your awakening internally by spending time with God and knowing that even though in the midst of challenges or in the midst of trials, what can you learn from this? During trials, that's exactly how God is going to teach you and build your character. People avoid trials at all costs because they think, well, I hate this trial. It's hard. It's ruining me. I can't really get on with my life. But when you learn that in every adversity, you must consider the lesson that must be learned, what God is trying to teach you. Maybe God is trying to teach you about patience, or maybe God is trying to teach you about faith, that perhaps in the moment of adversity, you need to trust God when no one else is there. You need to really depend fully in His timing and His guidance instead of looking around for people's answer and validation. That's why it's so important to develop this awaken internally by spending time with yourself, reflecting about your life, journaling about it, thinking about what have you been accomplishing throughout your years, comparing yourself not with other people, but comparing your life from 5 years ago into this year that you are currently now living, recognizing that what are the bad behaviors, bad habits that are not contributing to my future? What are the things that I can eliminate and subtract from my life that is actually making me stumble and making me drag my feet instead of going faster, and instead of truly living the life that God has in store for me? What are the things that are going to detract me from achieving the goals? Maybe too much social media browsing, doom scrolling, watching the news sometimes that is not helping your mindset, maybe watching too much reality TV show. There are things that you can subtract in your life that are actually not contributing to your success. You need to be very strategic and intentional of how you must spend your time. As I always like to say, time management is the key. You need to be a good steward with your time. Every one of us are given 24 hours in one day. God has allocated every one of us 24 hours in one day, and it's up to you and me how you spend the time. Time is a commodity that you cannot renew. It is something that if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. That's why it's important that you must be mindful and you must be faithful in the time that is given to you today, because that's all you have. This is it. You're not going to be able to live the same life tomorrow. And that's why when you have this awaken internally, you are no longer looking around for people's validation, as I always like to say, or permission how to exist and how to live. You are just going to do it. You're not going to wait for people's opinions. Should I follow my dreams? Should I do this? I used to do that. I used to be so debilitated by the decision making. I would call everybody in my phone list. What should I do with this? What do you think about this? And then they would have different opinions. Of course, people would have different point of view. This is why I really think that if you want to make the decision, I always go by this verse, Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not in your own understanding. Acknowledge Him and He will direct your path. People do not know best. They might have an opinion. They might have an idea, but they don't know the future. They cannot foretell what the future holds. So this is why instead of asking 5 different people's opinion about what should I do with my life, what is my purpose, maybe you should ask God. Yeah, the one who created you. He knows exactly why you're here. He knows your abilities. He knows your talents. He knows your skills. He knows what you're good at. So this is why you must learn to have trust in yourself. And by activating your inner intuition and inner voice, by shutting down the noise around you, by learning to really be connected with God and honing in that skill of the still small voice. Remember what happened to Ezekiel, or is it Elijah? I'm sorry, Elijah. When Elijah was trying to sought the voice of God, he said God was not in the wind, God was not in the storm, He was in the still small voice. Awakening internally takes a lot of time in the dark room. Dark room is a place where you are going to have a conversation with yourself and with God the Father. Do you know why Jesus spent time alone in the Garden of Olive? Because that's exactly where His dark room is. For you, maybe it's in your closet, maybe it's in the toilet, maybe it's in your car, maybe it's in your bed at night when you are just tired and you have no one else to talk to. For me, I sometimes just awaken at night, sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning or midnight, and I cannot sleep, and I would just lay down in my bed and I ask God, okay, you have awakened me. What is it that you want me to hear? Are you trying to teach me something today? What are you waking me up for? Sometimes we are awakened spiritually in those times because God has a message. Midnight, 3 o'clock, these are the times when maybe God is awakening us, and because He knows that at those times we are not distracted, there's no noise, It's very quiet. And if you are able to listen to that inner voice, which God is trying to tell you, because throughout the day, we're too busy. Throughout the day, we have so much responsibilities as a mom, as a wife, and we also have trying to raise a family and running our business. But maybe because God is trying to get our attention at midnight or 3 o'clock in the morning, usually that's a time when God would speak to me very clearly and vividly of what his message is. And you really have to learn to listen to that still small voice that will guide you. Maybe he wants you to think about what you have done that day and the things that you wish you have done differently. You probably have not repented of the wrongdoings, or maybe you have said a lot of bad things towards other people. Maybe he asks you to step out of your faith. This is why awaken internally is also trusting that timing is everything, that learning that it's okay to have failures. It's okay not to have your life perfectly figured out. It's about trial and error. It is about learning that sometimes life is not going to be a straight path. It's never a linear path. It's sometimes going to take you some detours. Remember what happened to the Israelites. God did not take them directly to the promised land. God had to detour them. God had told them that before you go to the promised land, you must spend time in the wilderness, because that was a training ground. The wilderness is a place for us to be trained by God, to listen to his voice, to really obey his commands, and to have our trust in him and our allegiances. This is why I've done a podcast many days ago about in the wilderness is where God is going to expose yourself to you. He's going to show you your addictions, your bad habits, your identity that was crooked and convoluted because of what people say. God is going to expose to you about your mother wounds, your father wounds, your abandonment issue, your jealousy, prideful spirit that you have. This is why it's important that when you are going to develop and awaken internally, you must be comfortable sitting in the dark room. You must not going to avoid that. You must learn to open up to this place of the spirit of the divine and the spirit of God and ask him, here I am, Lord, speak now. What would you like me to hear? Remember what happened to Samuel? When Samuel was in that priesthood and he was being dropped by his mother, and Samuel was called by God, and the first time Samuel went to the priest, I don't remember the name, Eli or something like that, he said, did you call me? And then he went back to sleep, and the priest said, no, I did not call you, go back to sleep. And then to make the story short, finally Samuel came back the third time, and the priest said, I think it's the Lord speaking to you. You must learn to listen. And when he speaks to you, this is exactly how you say. And so Samuel said to the Lord, here I am, Lord, I'm listening. So in the dark room, when you are being awakened internally, God is going to speak to you, and he's going to reveal himself to you only if you listen, only if you're willing to understand what he's saying. There's a difference between listening with our audible ears. When God speaks, it's coming from your conscience. It is an internal dialogue. It is not auditory. It is not from your ears. Some people mistaken like you're hearing voices. No, I'm not talking about that. It's different. When God speaks to you, you will know it. It is a still, small voice. It is calm. It does not intimidate. It does not condemn. When God speaks to you, he speaks in this manner of, it is I, the Lord. When I ask God, who, are you sure this is not my voice? And God speaks to me in this profoundly, it is I, the Lord, who's speaking to you. I know it is very antiquated. It is archaic. When God introduced himself to me, the very first time I heard his voice, not audibly, but internally, this is exactly how he introduced. It is I, the Lord, thy God, speaking to you. He speaks in the most original language. It's formal. It is not in a form that people use in our dialect today. It is something that the Bible that uses the King James Version. It is archaic. It is very old. And so you know when God speaks to you because it aligns with the Bible. It aligns with what he says in the Bible. He doesn't contradict himself because God is not a man that he should lie. So in order for you to develop and awaken internally is also, as I said, you have to really interrogate most of your belief, most of your indoctrination. Unfortunately, we have been indoctrinated through the school system, what we watch on TV, and sometimes we have lost track of who we really are in the eyes of God. And you need to interrogate, why do I believe the way that I do? Where did this come from? How did I have this opinion? Who told me about these things? Why did I believe that I'm ugly, that I'm never going to mount up to anything? Where did this come from? Did my mom used to tell me this? Or did my dad used to give me these lies? Why do you believe the way that you do? Why do you have certain ideas in your head? Because there's a root cause of it. It did not come from you. It did not originate from you. It came from the people that brought you up, usually the people that you have surrounded yourself with. This is why the Bible is clear. Evil company corrupts good moral. As a baby, you are not corrupted. You are pure. I mean, supposedly we were born with sin. However, when you're an infant, though, you are still not darkened or influenced by people around you because you are still a baby. However, when you become older and you become an adulthood, the people around you will influence you based on how you think about yourself, how you view the world, and how you even engage in the world. This is why it's important that when you become an adult and you do have a choice and you have now the ability to distinguish between lie and the truth, you must know, where did this come from? There are so many beliefs that I thought were true growing up. And then when I become an adult and I became in college, I went to school, I studied in college. That's when I realized that some of the upbringing and the lessons that I was taught were actually bogus, and some of them were lies. And I realized that much of my life I was brought up being religious, heathen, but there was no spiritual awakening. I was brought up in this idea of you need to show something externally by performing to people, grandiose. It's all about the looks. It's about the appearance. And I realized what God said. I am not impressed by the appearance. I'm actually look at the heart. Remember what happened to Samuel when he anointed David, and Samuel he made a mistake. He thought it was Eliab that was going to be the king because of his stature, because of his grandiose, confident. But God said, people look at the appearance, but I look at the heart. People misjudge always. Just because you look the part, it doesn't mean that you are God's choice. Because God will always weigh your heart. He knows exactly the content of your heart. And God is not impressed of how much money you have in the bank or how tall or how handsome you are. God is after character. God is all about learning to obey Him and believing in Him and being faithful. Much is required. If you are called by God, much is given, much is required. And this is why we have to really understand that being awakened internally takes a lot of self-awareness, humility, being willing to be in the dark room, being willing to be broken into pieces, being peeled like an onion. There are too many layers inside of you that God said, I cannot have all of that layers. This is why Jesus said, you must walk in the narrow path. He's going to narrow you down into a pulp where there's no more choices. So that's what God does. He will actually tell you that the world is wide, many goes there, and everybody falls into a ditch. But when God starts to awaken your internal compass, He will strip you off of everything that does not going to help you succeed in life. That's why Jesus had to be very careful of who he surrounded himself with. He only had 12 people around him. Jesus was very deliberate of choosing the right people around him. Jesus was also going to the mountaintop every time in the morning. He would talk to the Father. He was always loving solitude. If you want to be awakened internally, You cannot be afraid of having solitude. You must embrace solitude. You must cultivate peace. That's the only way for you to fully understand that in solitude, you will listen to the voice of God. You will hear your own thoughts. You will start to realize that some of the things that you have been believing or actually been indoctrinated to you based on lies and pure propaganda. And that's why when you want to be able to be awakened internally, is that you really have to be honest with yourself. There's really no way out, and it's about stumbling down and getting back up. It's about trial and error. You're not gonna be perfect in one night. I had shed many tears in my dark room. I have shed many tears, and I have been awakened many sleepless nights. And that's why that's the only way out, is through. The only way for you to have a breakthrough is getting through the nitty-gritty of what is happening inside of you, because we do live in the world where many people are performing. You can see them performing. It's all about trying to hide something underneath it. Sometimes we think that even if people are smiling, they might seem happy, but you have no idea the kind of darkness that they have to go through in life, or the kind of demons that they have to deal with behind closed doors. So we cannot just be fooled. I was that person. When I look at my old photos before, I thought from the outside looking in, I look like a happy girl. When I look at my pictures, I used to cry because I knew that I was just performing. When I look at my old pictures, I was actually lying to people, pretending like I was happy, smiling all the time. But little did people know that I was dealing with so much depression and suicidal thoughts at nighttime. But because I was so good, like everybody else, to perform, to hide behind the smile, that's why it's important that you must be authentic. You must be genuine enough to admit that you are not okay, and it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to lay down your problems at the feet of the cross. And I think that is the message that I would like for you to think about, that when Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy laden," it is not about exclusivity. He is inclusive. Jesus, when he said all of you, it's a plural. He didn't only say a certain group of people can come, or a certain individual, this type of people can only come to the cross. It's actually, he said, all of you, weary and tired. That's why the question is, where do you turn to when you're weary and tired? Where do you turn to when the world is sometimes collapsing and it seems as though your world is falling apart and nothing is going right? Where do you turn to? Where does your help come from? My help comes from the Lord, who is the maker of heaven and earth. And he will never fail you. He will never forsake you. He is a God that is so faithful. Even if people will walk away from you, even if people might not be there for you today, but God promised us that he is a faithful God, that he will always go before us, beside us, and behind us. And so if you feel like no one is there to understand you, no one really gets what you're going through, this is a time to remind yourself that there is one God, the Father who is in heaven, who have created you fearfully and wonderfully made in his timing, with his marvelous creation. And he knows that when you are faithful, he is also faithful to help you get through life. And he said also that he does not give us a problem unless he knows we can manage and handle it. God does not give us difficulties when he knows that he cannot give us an exit plan. God is always giving us an exit plan, a strategy of how we can navigate in this hustle, bustle, this arduous life problems that's going to come. I mean, I've been through a lot of temptation or trials in my life from this past few days. And the only reason why I'm still standing today is because the Spirit of God is able to guide me throughout this journey. It is only by his grace and by his strength. I always say, Lord, you are my fortress, you are my defender, that I can do all things through you.